against same-sex marriage. Now you're for it. You defended President Obama's immigration policies. Now you say they're too harsh. You supported his trade deal dozens of times. You even called it the gold standard. Now, suddenly last week, you're against it. Will you say anything to get elected?
Well, actually, I have been very consistent over the course of my entire life. I have always...
Okay, so we can make that 9-0. 9-0. That's the... Now, this isn't for Senate or Congress. It's a mayor. And of course, we just added him as a reboot candidate the other day. Woodfin. Woodfin. What a weird name. Well, he's a shark, so I'm saying he had his fin cut off in a by a ship, and he made himself a wooden fin, so he's Woodfin, and a bit of a genius. So the point being here is that I attribute this all to keeping Hillary out of the White House. I mean, one of the things that I think establishment Democrats are able to do is when they're president, they're able to make themselves look good, even though they're not good, and then endorse, and not just endorse, but quite often manipulate the, keep establishment. They're able to keep progressive Democrats out. They're able to cheat Democrats, real Democrats, progressive Democrats, making it so they don't even get in to compete. They're not even allowed to compete. Kind of like Bernie. Bernie was not allowed to compete against Trump. Yeah, I have a hard time even remembering his name because I don't think about him. I mean, I do kind of, he's on a side burner, because I know that beating establishment Democrats it's just like when you want to do something and you go to do it and you realize, well, I can't do that until I do this, right? So maybe you're going to cook something and you say, okay, well, I'm going to cook pancakes. Oh, wait a minute, I don't have any flour. So you got to go get flour, right? And then you can cook your pancakes, or whatever. You get the idea? Priorities. And so that's how it is with these establishment Democrats. We have to get them out of our way. They're blocking us. They're working for the Republican Party. Okay? They block progressives, and who's the real power behind them is the rich. Now, maybe not all the rich, but and I'm not condemning them, and I'm not saying destroy them and bring them, all you people with your pitchforks and your guillotines, just calm down. We're not going to do that. And I should just make that clear right now. We're not going to do that. We're not looking to bring down the rich, except for, well, in a few ways, but not like you're thinking of with pitchforks and guillotines. And we're not going to bring them down financially we will, but not, we're going to let them keep their lifestyles. We're going to let them remain. As a matter of fact, as I talked about before, we're going to guarantee their wealth. We're not looking to tear down wealth. We're looking to build new wealth from the bottom up. think of the world in the future as being a place where the rich are still rich, but the poor are no longer poor. And no, they may not, I mean, they're not going to all be rich. We can't have everybody being rich enough to do all the stupid shit that rich people do, right? And in the stupid way that they do it. But we're going to make everybody, well, rich, but not like that. We're going to give them rich lives. We're going to give them rich lives where we're going to give them opportunity. You know, that's been the lie all along. The rich are not trying to provide opportunity to the rest of the people. They take it away. Because if they give them opportunity, then under the current, I mean, you have to separate the scenarios. Okay, under the current scenario, if the poor were to have rich lives, they would destroy the rich, right? I mean, they would absolutely go after them and with pitchforks, and you know, they would. So once they got enough, I don't know, power through enrichment of their lives, you know, education and access to resources and things like that, they would go after the rich. I mean, I understand you're mad, you know, I understand, but you have to have some compassion for the rich. All they're doing is what animals do, all right? You know, they've taken the jungle and they've created their own jungle, because that's all that in their current state of evolution, that's all that they were capable of doing. Just like a lion kills, you know, whatever those things are that run through the savannas of Africa. Their version of deer. I just can't think of the name off the top of my head. I've only got so much room up here in my head. So anyway, so, you know, to condemn them for being them is just, I mean, more than likely most of you would have done the same thing. You know, you managed to accumulate wealth for your family and you probably would have protected it. Alright, well, what we're going to do is protect that wealth for them as part of our system, as part of the political system. So the United States of America, you know, is going to say, yeah, you can continue to send your kids to Harvard and Yale and all that kind of crap, and we'll create our own Harvards and Yales for ourselves. Except for maybe they'll just be online classes and locations to go to get testing, things like that. Okay, I've been on that for long enough. But my point is, well, another point that I'm trying to make about these candidates is that they'll be good in so many ways. I mean, the new government that's going to rise over progressive wins like this, because over and over and over we're gonna win, is going to create an environment that's great for everybody. I mean, people like this, you got The Intercept, and these guys are Americans who are afraid to come back to the country because of this security state that have put like people like Snowden and he's not an American, but Assange, great men who are fighting that security state. They can't even come to our country, and people like Glenn Greenwald, great man, who works for The Intercept, well, created The Intercept, have to live in Brazil or where is he living? I forget now. Anyway, they're like banditos down there, you know, they're hiding out because of our security state. And God, with Trump, they're probably even hiding more than ever. And the rich and Trump are down there in South America creating, basically looting the countries and turning them into sweatshops. And all that's got to change. I mean, I'm not saying that we can't work with kind of third world countries, countries that are undeveloped, to help develop them and make money off of them for the American people. For the United States is a country. Okay, a lot of you people can't understand that. A lot of you people don't want to understand that. You want to say no borders and all this shit. Well, no, right now we have to have nations, and the United States has to be a nation, and it has to protect itself. We don't live in a perfect world yet. We're creating it. Once we create it, we can take down the borders, and people won't come flooding into the United States because we've made their countries help those countries to be a place where people don't want to flee, and hopefully we'll have made the world a place where everybody doesn't hate America so much that they're not trying to infiltrate it and destroy it. And that is the case with a lot of people. A lot of people are so angry with us. Well, we've got to change that. And we do that right here. Right here. This is how we do it. Populists are on the march in the South. Bernie-backed insurgent Randall Woodfin defeats Birmingham incumbent mayor. I mean, this is how we're going to change the world. I know maybe some of you can't see that. Maybe it'll take time for this to develop, for you to see what's going to happen. I mean, basically, we're going to create a socialist world. But a socialist world where, and I'm telling you people, you've got to do this. You can't go to war. I mean, you'll destroy everything if you go to war with the rich. You have to cut a deal with them, and the deal will be that they can keep their wealth. That won't hurt us. We'll take over the economy, business, but we don't have to destroy their wealth to do it. And once we do, we'll create our own wealth. And if they continue to be the ass bites that they are, then we'll just isolate them. That's not an aggressive thing. When you isolate people, you do it simply by not having anything to do with them. Like countries like Israel will get isolated because and that doesn't mean we're going to build a fence around them and create a prison. It means that we're just going to show them that until they straighten up and do the right thing by the world, we're not going to have anything to do with them. We're not going to send them any aid. These billions of dollars that they've been getting have just been sick, right? I mean, this is like a sickness that the United States and American taxpayers have been sending $1 billion a year or something like that to Israel. I mean, they're not our problem, you know what I mean? They're not doing anything for us. They're not working for us. They're not good neighbors. They're not good allies. So you have to ask yourself, well, why? Why are we sending them the money? Well, because they're working for a small group of Americans, some ultra-rich Americans who set this thing up a long time ago, and apparently have a lot of Americans convinced that it's in the interest of the American people, and it's not in the interest of the American people. It's in the interest of them, the ones who really set it up. And I'm sure it'd be easy enough to connect the dots there and find out who set this up. And those are people in America that we have to keep an eye on, because you know, we won't take their wealth, but we're going to take the economy over, and we're going to take over their politics. We're not going to allow them to use our political system anymore to do horrible things like finance Israelis. Now, I'm not saying that we can't somehow straighten this thing out with the Israelis. There might be a way. I say always keep your eyes wide open, looking to make sure that you can find the best solution. So, like I say, 9-0, that's apparently that's what I'm hearing, and I'm not quite sure what that means. I don't know who 6 of the 9 were, because I just heard that in the article that I posted in one of my previous episodes. But this is number 9, as far as I know. And like I say, I attribute this to us keeping Hillary out of the White House. I think that created an opening for progressive candidates. I think that they can get into elections and therefore compete, and if progressives are allowed to compete with establishment Democrats, then they get to go up against the Republicans, and then they beat them. I mean, that's the only way. I've been saying this for so long, and it feels so good to see it play out, right? So, we took an awful risk, torpedoing Hillary in the general election. We've taken a great risk letting this asshat, Trump, be president, which doesn't mean much, as I said once before. I mean, all he is just a symbolic win for the rich who run everything anyway. And they'll try to run everything when we win, like we're winning now, but they're not going to be able to. I mean, having positions like mayors and governors and senates and the Congress, us taking all that over isn't going to be just a symbol, because we're going to take over the economy. We're going to take over the power, take the power. We're not going to allow them to run the government on high over our heads. Mainly they've done that by forcing people like Obama and the Clintons upon us. Okay, they're not going to be able to do that anymore. So once we get our people in the positions, then they're going to try and run things on high. I mean, don't ask me. I don't know how they do that. Maybe they threaten maybe they threaten, we need to talk to people like Jimmy Carter before he dies. They sabotage people. They have their own organizations, kind of like the CIA, who run around doing stuff, and we're going to put an end to that. Now, they may think that they can get away with running a shadow government, as we've talked about, or deep state, and all these cute little names we come out with, but basically what they are is independent, financed by them. Of course, we finance them because they steal our taxpayer dollars. So, we're going to have to put an end to all that. Now, they may not like that, but that's going to be part of the deal, right? So in exchange for allowing them and their families, as long as there's an American government, their wealth, they're going to have to put down that knife, put down that gun. They're not going to be allowed to do that. And they won't need to. They won't need to protect their wealth anymore. It'll be protected by us, by the government, and begrudgingly so, because they had no right to any of it in the first place. They all say, well, we worked so hard for what we've got. Well, everybody works hard, asswipes. We all work hard. I get up every day and I don't have time to do half the shit that I'm supposed to do. So don't talk to us about working hard. Everybody, I don't think anybody minds working. I think that what they mind is working for a system that fucks them in the ass. You guys, the rich, you fuck them in the ass. And I think that's what they mind. I mean, look at this guy. He wants to be mayor. You're going to say that's not hard work? And nobody should have to work hard. We need to work this out so that people just work, they just do their part. They don't have to, I don't see rich people beating their brains out having to work, or working like, your muscles, physically hard work. I mean, they may for periods of their life, but most of their life is spent sitting around doing nothing, maybe doing something they like or have fun, and just giving orders and acting like a big shot. So don't talk to me about hard work. And I know you guys. I've seen you guys, and I know how you live. I know the lives that you live. You don't work hard. That's bullshit. Okay, so I'll include this this article.
Populists are on the march in the South. Bernie-backed insurgent Randall Woodfin defeats Birmingham's incumbent Mayor Zaid Chilani October 3, 2017, 10:22 p.m. Birmingham's Mayor William Bell, first elected in 2010, was supposed to have an easy re-election. The poll released in early August found that 57% of his city's residents thought he was doing an excellent or good job. But populist challenger Randall Woodfin, a 36-year-old former Board of Education president endorsed by the Bernie Sanders-backed campaign group Our Revolution, topped Bell in the first round of voting in August. On Tuesday night, Woodfin finished the job in the runoff, stunning Alabama and winning the mayor's race comfortably. Woodfin defeated Bell with 58% of the vote. We sent nearly 8,000 get out the vote text messages to supporters and sent over 70 volunteers to his campaign, Diane May, communications director for Our Revolution, told The Intercept about the group's support for the candidate leading up to the first round. In advance of the runoff, they made over 1,000 calls and sent 11,000 text messages to voters. Sanders himself phoned in robocalls for Woodfin. The Woodfin campaign's director of field operations, activist Daniel Irizo, was an alum of Sanders's 2016 campaign. The Working Families Party, the national progressive organization that was founded in New York but has since expanded nationwide, also played a role in Woodfin's election. 125 WFP volunteers contacted 22,000 voters by text and phone, helping push Woodfin over the top. Randall Woodfin ran on the idea that the people of Birmingham have a right to demand a government that truly works for all its people, and that a city can provide opportunity and lift up those who've been left behind. Joe Dinkin, national spokesperson for the WFP, said in a statement. Woodfin is part of a wave of local candidates around the nation who are running on bold, transformative, progressive visions and winning. Woodfin's platform is, by itself, far from radical in post-2016 Democratic politics. He seeks to make community college free for students who graduate from Birmingham's high schools. He wants to expand pre-K and invest in public transit and job training. Woodfin backed Democrat Hillary Clinton in the 2016 primary, making our revolution backing something of a wound-healing exercise. He is also looking to boost the city's police force. Birmingham has the 7th highest homicide rate of cities of over 100,000 people. He had his own personal connection to the city's sky-high crime. His nephew was shot and killed during the course of the campaign. The boy's father, Woodfin's older brother, was killed in a shooting 5 years before that. But Woodfin's campaign did not take place in a vacuum. His election comes just months after Jackson, Mississippi, the state's largest city, elected Chokwe Lumumba Jr., a young populist who has vowed to make it the most radical city on the planet. In November, Atlanta's voters will go to the polls to choose the next mayor. One of the candidates, former state Senate Democratic Whip Vincent Fort, a longtime foe of Wall Street and the city's Democratic establishment, is also being backed by our revolution, as well as Sanders. Although the 12-candidate nonpartisan race makes the results difficult to predict, Fort's impact on the race can be seen in the changing behavior of the city council. It recently voted to raise the wages of city workers to $15 an hour and decriminalize small amounts of marijuana, both causes Fort had worked towards for years. Should Fort succeed, the largest cities in Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia will be run by mayors running from anti-establishment to downright radical, all within the span of 6 months of elections. Update, October 4, 2017, 11:25 a.m. This article was updated with the final election results, as well as a statement from the Working Families Party.
You think New York State should recognize gay marriage?
No.
No. Okay.
I believe that marriage is not just a bond, but a sacred bond between a man and a woman.
I have not supported same-sex marriage. I have supported civil partnerships and contractual relationships.
I support marriage for lesbian and gay couples. I support it personally and as a matter of policy and law.
So you're saying your opinion on gay marriage changed, or you changed your mind?
I have to say, I think you are being very persistent, but you are playing with my words and playing with what is such an
I'm just trying to clarify
issue.
So I can understand.
No, I don't think you are trying to clarify. I think you're trying to say that, I used to be opposed and now I'm in favor and I did it for political reasons, and that's just flat wrong. So let me just state what I feel like you are implying and repudiate it. I have a strong record. I have a great commitment to this issue, and I am proud of what I've done and the progress we're making.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify what I was saying. No, I was saying that you maybe really believed this all along, but, believed in gay marriage all along, but felt for political reasons America wasn't ready yet and you couldn't say it. That's what I was thinking.
No, that is not true.
It really is great how long you've supported gay marriage.
Yes.
I could have supported it sooner.
Well, you did it pretty soon.
Could have been sooner.
Fair point.
So it's going to be another beautiful early fall day, and it's hard to believe that on a beautiful day, like so many beautiful days we have, that people are thinking about bloody war. I mean, I suppose the fact that there is bloody war going on makes us all realize that there could be, and Specifically, what I'm talking about, though, is my left-wing buddies, my progressive friends, Antifa and Anonymous, and all the people who consider themselves part of those groups, of which I would consider myself a part of too. I mean, maybe not of like a core member or something. I don't even think that they're really technically groups with leaders. They're just people who kind of gather together on the spur of the moment, as far as I can tell. Anyway, you know, after the inauguration, of course, we all saw that Antifa, or whatever it is, Anonymous, can get out of hand, you know, because we don't condone any of that shit. I mean, we like it. We like to see something being done, and that's just where it comes in, right? I mean, people want to do something and they feel like they can't do it politically, and they're wrong about that. You know, time is a line that goes along. Just because you can't do it here doesn't mean you can't do it here. So in the future, you know, we'll be able to do it. And people have to be patient. We'll get it done. We're already getting it done right now. And I still say getting rid of Hillary was the key to doing it. So, you know, you may not believe it, but we will get it done. And you get the same thing going on in the ultra-right, right? They believe that they want to get rid of us, more or less. They want to get rid of our message, and they don't want the country moving to the left, because the rich have instilled this fear in them that we're going to take everything away from them. Well, when I say we're going to keep the rich rich, at least from a lifestyle point of view, we're not going to do anything to make the middle class or the upper middle class or the lower middle class. I mean, we might work on making the lower middle class a little richer, and of course the lower class is of course richer, and the middle class will at least endeavor to keep them the same under the system that I'm talking about. But we're not gonna, I mean, this is gonna be good for all those right-wing people out there. We're not gonna make them poor so black people can have some money. That's not gonna happen. And the rich telling you that, they're just being fucking assholes, okay? I mean, that's all that they're doing. They see you as stupid and easy to fool. You know, they're con men. So they convince you of that, and then you guys try to come down on us, and that's the game that they play. Well, don't listen to them. You know, this message needs to go out to the right wing. I don't talk to the right wing. So you out there in the left wing are going to have to, who I do talk to, who I call the middle, just like they love to call the right wing the middle. They're not. We're the middle. I mean, the majority is always the middle, right? Technically. But in terms of rationality, we're way in the middle. We're right in the middle. We're the most rational. There's no doubt about that. Our concerns about the environment, which go back to the 60s, before there was even talk about climate change. You know, all this stuff that we represent, our agenda, is just a rational agenda. It's just, you know, it's stifled by the media and because they want their oil money. They want to sell gas, you know. I mean, imagine people who, you know, own oil and gas running everything. Just amazing. And you know, the first car was an electric car. The first cars they came out with ran on on electricity. I don't know if they ran on a battery. They may have run on tracks on the ground or something. Battery technology, I don't know how good it was back then. But yeah, the first one was electric. At least that's what I heard. So, and imagine how great this world would have been if they had just put tracks in the roads like slot cars, and everybody got around that way, you know, with cars. And eventually they would have, you know, I mean, obviously the technology just gets better and better, and we would have had amazing electric cars by the 60s, you know, with the advent of the first computer. You would have had already some massive technology, just impressive electric cars that, and by now we'd have just who knows what we'd have. But capitalism in fact does stifle innovation, at least in our case. I mean, there's enough proof out there that the rich have kept us away from technology so that you know, whether you want to talk about storing 100-mile-per-gallon carburetor in a safe for 100 years or whatever, you know, regardless of whether that particular claim is true, for sure they have kept us on oil and gas, right? And you know, up to now it's worked out okay, but who knows what we missed out on, right? And who knows what we're missing out on right now, because you know, the ultra rich have got us on this track. And they refuse to let us get off the track. They think that they've got it all planned out, and well, they do for them, but not for the rest of us.
In July, New Hampshire, you told the crowd you, quote, take a backseat to no one when it comes to progressive values.
I take a backseat to no one when you look at my record in standing up and fighting for progressive values.
Last month in Ohio, you said you plead guilty to, quote, being kind of moderate and center. Do you change your political identity based on who you're talking to?
No, I think that, like most people that I know, I have a range of views, but they are rooted in my values and my experience.
You know, I get accused of being kind of moderate and center. I plead guilty.
Just for the record, are you a progressive or are you a moderate?
I'm a
first never-before-seen video of Hillary Clinton inside the Walmart empire. She's probably one of the most investigative politicians in American history. And this morning you're going to see her in a way you've never seen her before, serving on the board of Walmart. ABC News chief investigative correspondent Brian Ross is here with details on this. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Robin. Although she makes no mention of it in her official biography, Hillary Clinton served for 6 years on the board of Walmart, the huge retailer criticized by many for its treatment of workers and its strident opposition to unions.
as far as gun violence goes, I suggest you all go to Democracy Now! And look at yesterday's. If you go to Democracy Now! Still there'll be this link. Anybody can find Democracy Now! And this link is, you know, I'm not going to do something on gun control. I mean, if you ask me right now what I believe about gun control, I still believe I should be allowed to have a gun. I got Grandpa's shotgun, maybe great-grandpa's. It's a 1931 Ithaca double-barrel 12 gauge. I got it sitting over there in the corner because I love my heritage. I love my grandparents, and that's the only thing he left me was that shotgun. And so, you know, I mean, I love my guns. I don't think anybody's even thinking about trying to take away my old gun, but at the same time, until, you know, you people get your shit straight, get things straightened out to where I don't feel like I need a gun around the house just in case somebody were to break in the middle of the night or try to break into my car or something like that, which hasn't happened since I lived in an apartment complex. But I don't believe in your right to take away my guns. I do believe in this, and that's
This is Democracy Now! Democracy.
And she covers it beautifully in here. I'll let you listen to just a little bit of it, but I'm not, like I say, I'm not going to do a whole segment. I mean, I'm doing a segment on it right now, but I'm telling you, go watch this, because I can't do anything that good. Even my opinion isn't as important as what they have to say in this segment.
Now.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
We turn now to the aftermath of the deadly shooting in Las Vegas as new details emerge about how 64-year-old Stephen Paddock carried out Sunday night's massacre at a country music festival, which left 59 people dead and 527 others wounded. Leaked photographs from the crime scene on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel show Paddock's body on the floor near what appears to be a handwritten note on a table. It's not known what's written on that paper. The photos also show a number of assault rifles strewn around the room, including one with a scope on a bipod used to steady the gun. Other photos show high-capacity magazines, and 12 of Paddock's rifles had bump stock modifications that effectively made them fully automatic machine guns.
Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, House Speaker Paul Ryan said he's suspending consideration of a bill that would make gun silencers widely available. He appeared to leave open the possibility lawmakers would take the bill up again later this fall. But the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell rejected calls Tuesday by some Democrats for new gun control laws in the wake of the Las Vegas massacre. Well, today we're going to look at how Australia changed its laws.
McConnell's an ass. You know, a progressive needs to run against him. He's got no... I don't believe he has... I mean, how can he have any support in Kentucky? I mean, a few people must just go out and vote for him, and the rest of Kentucky must stay at home, because for them to not know that McConnell's just an ass is impossible. So, I mean, anybody could knock him off, and I'll tell you what, I'm going to announce my candidacy. I don't know how you say that right off the top of my head. Anyway, I'm announcing it. If nobody else who I like and is a progressive comes along to run against him, I'll run against him. You know, the last thing I want to be is a politician, and I certainly don't want to have to go to Washington and fight with all those assholes, although I would if it was the beginning of a progressive you know, Congress. I mean, my God, that would be a glorious thing to see. But I've got a perfectly wonderful life, and I would like to just live it out just like it is right now. If I could keep things the way they are till the end of my life, I would. I love it, you know. I even have time for this crap. I mean, it is crap. I should not have to do it. I should not have to give up 4 or 5 hours of my day to try to communicate with the rest of the country because the rest of the country can't seem to get its shit together, right? I mean, I'm only doing it because, but, you know, I'm not the only one, right? Here's Amy, and there's plenty of others, and they're all great. I pointed out that article from The Intercept this morning. Wonderful, wonderful news organization. Has to operate outside of the country. God, what does that say, huh? So anyway, I think we're on the edge. I think we're about to go over, and it's going to be good. We're going to land on a nice soft pillow of progressivism. Candidacy. Yeah, candidacy. I'm announcing my candidacy. I hope that's right. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm just kind of, I get hung up on when I can't remember how to say a word. But, you know, I mean, I would love it if, maybe it wouldn't be perfect, but if people like Amy and, you know, I don't know how it would work out with letting millions of Mexicans flood into the country. I mean, we're not Mexico. Mexico is Mexico. They need to find a way to, you know, take care of their people, and we need to find a way. I mean, Mexico's a country that's got a lot of potential. You know, it's like the United States. It's about half desert. Well, we're not half desert, but it's got a lot of good land, and their problems are just political. You know, their problems are we ran all the Indians down there, and on top of all the Indians that were down there, and so they're having their little war. That's why they stick with the United States, the government does, because they've got, I mean, we've got a lot of minorities, but they're like 80% minorities, and then the other, I don't know, you'll have to look at their demographics, but the European Mexicans are a minority, and probably a vast minority. And, you know, those European Mexicans would love to run all the people, because they don't like their indigenous, just like white people don't like their minorities. Well, we've all got to figure out how to live together, because those minorities are Americans. And in Mexico, those indigenous people are Mexican. And we've all got to start acting in the best interest of our own citizens, not the other people's citizens. We don't have to take care of Mexicans. That's not our, I mean, it's our problem, but it's not our job. Our job is to take care of Americans. And when we get everything straightened out, then, you know, everybody'd be more than happy to try and look after each other. But in our own borders, okay? I mean, what are we going to let 1 billion Chinese move into the United States as well, and 1 billion Indians? And you know, this country would be so top heavy, the freaking world would affect the rotation of the planet. I'm just joking now, but I mean, seriously, you can't do that. That's just not possible. All that you'd achieve is some kind of massive chaos that would end up in something worse than what you got now. So you gotta work within your borders. I mean, hopefully we could create a world where everybody could stay within their borders and maybe get their own populations down through population control. I mean, other than war, right? And disease. You know, there's something called old age. And of course that may end too eventually, right? I mean, technology's constantly coming around. You never know when all of a sudden people are going to be able to live for, well, if not forever, for a very long time. And then you'd have to get run over by a car or die in an airplane crash or something in order to die. Now that wouldn't work if we just kept on going the way we're going. There's just no way. We'd have to have some way of slowing down the babies coming out, you know. So, you know, if you want to find out more about what I believe about gun control, I agree with what's in here.
After a massacre 20 years ago, in April of 1996, a gunman opened fire on tourists in Port Arthur, Tasmania, killing 35 people.
And I studied that. I mean, she just describes it, but it was horrific. I mean, this guy went in, he started out in a cafe in the tourist center, just shooting people at their tables, and people just begging him not to shoot them, and he just took his time and went through the whole and then went out to where the buses are, and I mean, and then eventually he ended up in some cabin somewhere, and I think he burned himself alive in it. And they never, there were other people, he had hostages, so they were not able to figure out whether he died in there at first. I mean, it's just utter chaos, huh? And these guys, I will say a little bit about this. First of all, how do you stop something when, I mean, this guy had absolutely no alarm went off. You know, maybe the fact that he bought like 18 guns, but there are millions of people in America who buy lots and lots of guns. I myself owned a whole bunch for a little while, including an assault rifle and a high-power hunting rifle, which was semi-automatic. I mean, you could load 4 shots at a time, 300 Win Mag. You know, when I used to love guns, I used to talk about how awesome they were, and they were awesome guns. But, you know, I would never get up in a hotel and fire from the roof. Is it just me, or does Amy's throat look like it's bulging out to the side on one side? Maybe it's just me. But she does have a lot of coughing problems. I hope she's okay. We need her. So, you know, how do you I mean, well, the obvious thing is you don't allow people to buy that many guns. You don't allow them to buy the and if you watch this, you'll find out all that.
Wounding 23 others. This is an Australian television report on the incident from the day of the shooting. Okay. The culture, the Crocodile Dundees. Explain what happened after Port Arthur.
Well, I just brings it all back listening to that clip. It's important to remember that before Port Arthur, we had a series of mass shootings, about one a year, and each time there was a lot of discussion, noise, grief, prayers, anger, thoughts about what to do. But
sound familiar? I mean, that's what we go through, right? About one a year, maybe 2.
Our politicians were sort of frozen, afraid to take action to reform the gun laws. And even though there was plenty of expert advice, there had been committees, there were researchers, there was a lot, it was very clear what needed to be done. What happened when Port Arthur occurred, the number of victims was so large, and also the fact that it was in a tourist location, actually not dissimilar from what's happened in Las Vegas. So people from all over the country were directly affected. And we had this new conservative government, and the Prime Minister just said, this is it, we're done, we've been talking about this for years, it's time to take action. So he negotiated with all the states to bring about the
So basically they're describing what we should do, right? And we've got a conservative, but he's
opening up national parks for hunting.
Too much of an ass to do anything. And it is just sickening to hear, like Mitch McConnell say, well, this isn't the time. Fuck you. Fuck you. You don't decide whether it's time for us to have this debate or this conversation. And it's not even a conversation. We all know what needs to be done, and you can go watch this or anything you want to find out what that is. I mean, obviously we have to ban assault rifles and these little trigger things that come with that they can buy and all those kind of things. You know, if you want to own a high-powered rifle, you should have to prove that you're going to use it for hunting or something, because nobody fucking hunts anymore. There's just a few people out there who run around with and want those guns, and we need to put an end to those guns. I mean, you don't need a high-power rifle. And I was talking about this earlier. You know, this idea, I think, was ill-founded in the first place, but it was a different time that we all need to be armed in case we have to rise up against the government. Well, I mean, that was back a long time ago. How do you rise up against a government that has nuclear weapons? I mean, you could get everybody blown up if the government decided, you know, if it came down to a fight between the people and the government, and they had a whole bunch of people with AR-15 semi-autos trying to come down on the White House, they could just nuke us out of existence. So, I mean, that's just not really an option. I mean, if we decided to go that way, the tools that we would need would be our brains. We would have to come up with a way to do it. Very sneaky and very effective. A sudden rush, and you know, we would have to use our numbers. And let's not even talk about that. I mean, let's not even talk about that. Let's find a way. I mean, you know what? If this world and if this country was that fucked up that we had to talk about knocking off like President Trump and his entire apparatus and the entire rich, I don't think I'd want to live in it anyway. So, you know, maybe the solution would be to let them have it. Because, I mean, who gives a fuck if the world is that fucked up that we can't get, that we're living under a fascist state and we don't even know it, right? So, let's hope that it's not really as bad as, well, certainly as bad as some people make it out, and that we don't have to really rise up and fight some kind of, it's inconceivable that we would even win. So let's just talk about doing it the other way, the ways that I'm talking about doing it. We're talking about a revolution, a political revolution, talking about what Bernie talks about, what everybody talks about. Let's give that, you know, at least 10 or 20 more years to play out. I know you've waited 200 years, but let's give it a couple more, you know, 10 or 20 years, because I can feel it. I can feel it coming. You know, I'm not a psychic, but I can just see it in the past and in the present. I can see it coming. So give me a chance. Let us try, because I don't want to die in some ill-conceived civil war to try and knock off the Trumps of the world. And I dislike him as much as you do. I mean, I think he's just a thug. I think he's a racist. I think he's, you know, archaic. He belongs in another time. And he doesn't even belong there, because his stupidity wouldn't get him anywhere back in the old times. You know, the people of the world, New York, Washington, D.C., the United States, would never, even in the heyday of conservatism, would never have tolerated a jackass like this. All right? Okay, that's all I'm going to say about Trump, because I don't think that Trump's the problem. I think that the problem is establishment Democrats. We get rid of them, we become a progressive Democratic Party, which we've been since the 1930s. And that's the way to do it, not even thinking about armed insurrection and stuff. We need to get these guns out of the hands of everybody. You know, I'm sorry if you all want your little guns because you think you're tough guys and you're going to make a revolution, whether you're teabaggers or you're left-wing nut jobs, you know, whichever ones you are, you're going to have to give up your guns, because we're not going to do things that way, and we're not going to pretend like we're going to do things that way to make you feel like, and let's face it, a lot of you just like your guns. You know, you like them, like I said, tough guys. You like to think you're tough, you know, with your guns. Well, you know, you can make a claim that you're doing something altruistic, something higher-minded, you know, that you're fighting for a great cause and all the shit, but in fact, when you face the fact that this revolution, this armed insurrection that you know, you just watch too much Star Wars or stuff like that, you know, where the rebellion, you know, and all that kind of stuff. You know where the rebellion is? It's ISIS. They're the ones who rebelled against the United States. They're the rebellion. We think of them as such horrible, evil Muslims, you know, Muslim militants and fundamentalists. Well, there's your revolution. You want to join a revolution? Go fight for ISIS. I mean, that's exactly what you're proposing. I know you like to think your revolution is better than their revolution, but revolution is revolution. Revolution is, and I'm talking about Civil War type revolution. I lived through that. I've seen it. There's nothing glorious about it, and you usually end up losing, you know. So, and it ends up in you and a whole bunch of your friends in graves, if you're lucky. Maybe just your body's being picked at by the birds. And so, you know, let's get that off the table right now. I mean, I'm telling you right now, the progressive future I see doesn't tolerate any of that. You know, you can call that fascism, you can call us thugs, but we're not in it for that. We're in it to end poverty and the chaos and everything. You may think that you can end it, but that doesn't ever even work out anyway. I mean, look at all those revolutions, the violent revolutions. They all are just temporary solutions. We need a permanent solution. That's what government is all about. It's about people getting together and doing things that as individuals they cannot do. And that's what brings about permanent solutions. You know, that's how we build Hoover Dam. You know, it's not like Joe Cool could go down there and build it all by himself. A whole bunch of people get together. That's how we create the electrical grid and NASA and go to the moon and all this stuff, whether that's a good priority or not, I'm not interested in discussing, but that's how we get together and do things that last, okay? I mean, we've had a constitution for 200 years, and it has, whether you want to criticize but it has, to a large extent, created freedom and protection, civil rights in our country to a large extent. I'm not saying that they haven't managed to screw us on it. Okay, so anyway, we need to do that, and that's how we need to do it, is politically. We need to do it. So,
and this has been the response of the NRA in massacre after massacre. Don't talk about it right now. You even had Sarah Huckabee Sanders saying, maybe later we'll talk about it, because the pressure is so enormous now that they had to say, maybe later we will talk about it. But, you know, when the horror dies down and they're not worried anymore. So talk about the speed with which it happened in Australia. Again, a country of so many gun lovers that was committed to allowing guns through Australia.
so they're saying it's now or never, and they're right.
Well, it's just, I mean, with any, you know, humanitarian or public health or criminal crisis, and in the instant, you do need to talk about what to do to prevent it. And it isn't politics to talk about preventing people being killed and injured. One of the great things that happened in Australia was in that moment, both sides of politics said, this is not political.
Work on small...
But it is political. I mean, politics is the mechanism. It's guttural is what it is. I mean, it's a gut instinct, you know, but then you have to have a system to make it work. Like I was just saying about how you have to have you know, people getting together to do things that they can't do on their own. And so you do need the political system, and I'm sure she talks about that.
Arms, who led the campaign to reform Australia's gun laws after the Port Arthur massacre, which saw 35 people killed and a score of people injured. This is Democracy Now! When we return, we'll speak to Bishop William Barber. Stay with us.
That was a really interesting story, the thing with Bishop, and I don't remember what it was about. I just remember, wow, that's astonishing stuff. So maybe we'll look at that again too. You know, all I can do is add my, hopefully, a little bit of wisdom to what they're saying. You know, maybe put it into a context that Democracy Now! Doesn't manage to get. I mean, I like to think I'm around here for some reason. Otherwise, you could just go watch these things and get everything. And as far as the core stuff goes, the basics and the facts, you know, I'm just one guy sitting around talking. Hopefully I'm highly intelligent. Otherwise I'm wasting my time here and I should be doing something else.
Walmart's opposition to unions was led for decades by labor lawyer John Tate, who after his retirement proudly recalled at this company meeting in 2004 what he said was his favorite phrase.
Labor unions are nothing but blood-sucking parasites living off of the productive labor of people who work for a living.
Hillary Clinton was not present at this Walmart meeting, but Tate was relied on for years to keep unions out at Walmart, including during the 6 years from 1986 to 92, when Clinton was on the Walmart board and Tate was either an executive or a member of the board himself.
Going through
there were over 60,000 in total sent and received. About half were work-related and went to the State Department, and about half were personal, that were not in any way related to my work.
When you speak to the public, you say, I turned over everything. That's, for the most part, a direct quote. When you talk to the public, you say, I turned over everything.
90 to 95% of my work-related emails were in the state system. If they wanted to see them, they would certainly have been able to.
You know what?
So.
That is maybe the 10th time you have cited that figure today.
It is.
And I have not heard anyone other than you ever cite that figure. Who told you that 90 to 95% of your emails were in the State Department system? Who told you that?
We learned that from the State Department in their analysis of the emails that were already on the system.
The Inspector General report found that less than 1% of State Department emails, record emails, were captured. So they give a number of less than 1%, and you give a number of 90%.
Patricia Wright posts, "The end of empire. The death spiral appears unstoppable, meaning the U.S. as we know it will no longer exist within a decade, or at most two." This is, she says, if you don't know Chris Hedges, which would be hard not to if you're a progressive, or Truth Dig, this article, The End of Empire, is a good introduction. In general, he is usually brilliant, depressing, and true. I read him. Okay. Let me tell you something. This is all wrong. I mean, let me tell you how first of all, America doesn't have an empire. We the people do not have an empire. We the people are not a strong country. America is strong because of the Bushes and the neocons. They created the empire. Not just them, but all of the people they worked for. And because of all the people who worked for them, like my dad, undercover. And that's the empire, and it's not American. Americans are like every other person in the world. Everybody's striving, not everybody, but most people are just like dying for some kind of anything that will make them feel maybe not important, but maybe not feel so unimportant, not feel like they live and they die and then they're forgotten and nobody remembers them. But that's the way it is, man. I mean, that's the way it is for all of us. I mean, even the Bushes will be forgotten in time. And all bad people will be forgotten in time, trust me. I know what I'm talking about here. I know I don't have any, I can't point to something and say, see, I know what I'm talking about. But anybody who watches my show knows I do know what I'm talking about. And that's just life, and I know it's hard to get over, it's hard to deal with, but you don't have to think about it all the time. You don't have to let it depress you. But Chris Hedges is wrong. The empire is a worldwide empire, and whether or not it's going to come crashing down is if the people of the world get together and just say, hey, enough is enough, and we're going to put an end to it, and suddenly people power goes like fire across the earth, and real democracy and real economics of, by, for the people is implemented, and like if I get my way, if everything goes the way I would like it to go. And even then, the empire won't go away, it'll just transform into something better for everybody, including rich people, because they'll benefit from it too. They won't have to worry about guillotines and pitchforks. So, you know, Chris Hedges, he loves to predict that capitalism will, you know, eat itself, and the old yin-yang kind of thing, and whatever, you know, he can believe what he wants. He went to Harvard or somewhere like that, and I'm sure he's got a right to his guess as well as anybody else, and I've got a right to mine. And I will tell you that he's looking at it from the wrong perspective. I mean, it's just he's kind of looking at it from the United States is this vast power that after World War II became a superpower. Well, all that's just smoke and mirrors. All that's for show. I mean, what's really happened is the capitalists have always been ruling most of this earth, you know, one way or another. I mean, yeah, a few places are always out from underneath their, I wouldn't say out from, they're still within view. You know, they're still keeping track of them. They're just trying to figure out how to get everybody under their umbrella, you know. And that, you know, if he had said in this article that's what's going to, that, you know, the whole world is going to get loose and that progressivism is going to take over, but that's not really what he didn't say that progressivism was going to take over. He's more predicting a kind of breakdown. So I'll let you listen to it, and then we'll talk more about how I differ from his opinion.
October 1st, 2017. The end of empire. The American empire is coming to an end. The U.S. economy is being drained by wars in the Middle East and vast military expansion around the globe. It is burdened by growing deficits, along with the devastating effects of the industrialization and global trade agreements. Our democracy has been captured and destroyed by corporations that steadily demand more tax cuts, more deregulation and impunity from prosecution for massive acts of financial fraud, all the while looting trillions from the U.S. Treasury in the form of bailouts. The nation has lost the power and respect needed to induce allies in Europe, Latin America, Asia and Africa to do its bidding. Add to this the mounting destruction caused by climate change and you have a recipe for an emerging dystopia. Overseeing this descent at the highest levels of the federal and state governments is a motley collection of imbeciles, con artists, thieves, opportunists and warmongering generals. And to be clear, I am speaking about Democrats, too. The empire will limp along, steadily losing influence until the dollar is dropped as the world's reserve currency, plunging the United States into a crippling depression and instantly forcing the massive contraction of its military machine. Short of a sudden and widespread popular revolt, which does not seem likely, the death spiral appears unstoppable. meaning the United States as we know it will no longer exist within a decade or, at most, two. The global vacuum we leave behind will be filled by China, already establishing itself as an economic and military juggernaut, or perhaps there will be a multipolar world carved up among Russia, China, India, Brazil, Turkey, South Africa and a few other states. Or maybe the void will be filled, as the historian Alfred W. McCoy writes in his book In the Shadows of the American Century, The Rise and Decline of U.S. Global Power, by a coalition of transnational corporations, multilateral military forces like NATO, and an international financial leadership self-selected at Davos and Bilderberg that will forge a supranational nexus to supersede any nation or empire. Under every measurement, from financial growth and infrastructure investment to advanced technology, including supercomputers, space weaponry and cyber warfare, we are being rapidly overtaken by the Chinese. In April 2015, the U.S. Department of Agriculture suggested that the American economy would grow by nearly 50% over the next 15 years, while China's would triple and come close to surpassing America's in 2030, McCoy noted. China became the world's second-largest economy in 2010, the same year it became the world's leading manufacturing nation, pushing aside the United States that had dominated the world's manufacturing for a century. The Department of Defense issued a sober report titled At Our Own Peril, Risk Assessment in a Post-Primacy World. It found that the U.S. military no longer enjoys an unassailable position versus state competitors, and it no longer can automatically generate consistent and sustained local military superiority at range. McCoy predicts the collapse will come by 2030. Empires in decay embrace an almost willful suicide. Blinded by their hubris and unable to face the reality of their diminishing power, they retreat into a fantasy world where hard and unpleasant facts no longer intrude. They replace diplomacy, multilateralism and politics with unilateral threats and the blunt instrument of war. This collective self-delusion saw the United States make the greatest strategic blunder in its history, one that sounded the death knell of the empire: the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq. The architects of the war in the George W. Bush White House, and the array of useful idiots in the press and academia who were cheerleaders for it, knew very little about the countries being invaded, were stunningly naive about the effects of industrial warfare, and were blindsided by the ferocious blowback. They stated, and probably believed, that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, although they had no valid evidence to support this claim. They insisted that democracy would be implanted in Baghdad and spread across the Middle East. They assured the public that U.S. troops would be greeted by grateful Iraqis and Afghans as liberators. They promised that oil revenues would cover the cost of reconstruction. They insisted that the bold and quick military strike, shock and awe would restore American hegemony in the region and dominance in the world. It did the opposite. As Zbigniew Brzezinski noted, this unilateral war of choice against Iraq precipitated the widespread legitimation of U.S. foreign policy. Historians of empire call these military fiascos a feature of all late empires, examples of micromilitarism. The Athenians engaged in micromilitarism when during the Peloponnesian War 431–404 BC they invaded Sicily, suffering the loss of 200 ships and thousands of soldiers and triggering revolts throughout the empire. Britain did so in 1956 when it attacked Egypt in a dispute over the nationalization of the Suez Canal, and then quickly had to withdraw in humiliation, empowering a string of Arab nationalist leaders such as Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser and dooming British rule over the nation's few remaining colonies. Neither of these empires recovered. While rising empires are often judicious, even rational in their application of armed force for conquest and control of overseas dominions, fading empires are inclined to ill-considered displays of power, dreaming of bold military masterstrokes that would somehow recoup lost prestige and power, McCoy writes. Often irrational even from an imperial point of view, these micro-military operations can yield hemorrhaging expenditures or humiliating defeats that only accelerate the process already underway. Empires need more than force to dominate other nations. They need a mystique. This mystique, a mask for imperial plunder, repression and exploitation, seduces some native elites, who become willing to do the bidding of the imperial power or at least remain passive. And it provides a pattern of civility and even nobility to justify to those at home the costs in blood and money needed to maintain empire. The parliamentary system of government that Britain replicated in appearance in the colonies, and the introduction of British sports such as polo, cricket and horse racing, along with elaborately uniformed viceroys and the pageantry of royalty, were buttressed by what the colonialists said was the invincibility of their navy and army. England was able to hold its empire together from 1815 to 1914 before being forced into a steady retreat. America's high-blown rhetoric about democracy, liberty and equality, along with basketball, baseball and Hollywood, as well as our own deification of the military, entranced and cowed much of the globe in the wake of World War II. Behind the scenes, of course, the CIA used its bag of dirty tricks to orchestrate coups, fix elections and carry out assassinations, black propaganda campaigns, bribery, blackmail, intimidation and torture. But none of this works anymore. The loss of the mystique is crippling. It makes it hard to find client surrogates to administer the empire, as we have seen in Iraq and Afghanistan. The photographs of physical abuse and sexual humiliation imposed on Arab prisoners at Abu Ghraib inflamed the Muslim world and federal Al-Qaeda and later Islamic State with new recruits. The assassination of Osama bin Laden and host of other jihadist leaders, including the U.S. citizen Anwar al-Awlaki, openly mocked the concept of the rule of law. The hundreds of thousands of dead and millions of refugees fleeing our debacles in the Middle East, along with the near-constant threat from militarized aerial drones, exposed us as state terrorists. We have exercised in the Middle East the U.S. military's penchant for widespread atrocities, indiscriminate violence, lies and blundering miscalculations, actions that led to our defeat in Vietnam. The brutality abroad is matched by a growing brutality at home. Militarized police gun down mostly unarmed poor people of color and fill a system of penitentiaries and jails that hold a staggering 25% of the world's prisoners, although Americans represent only 5% of global population. Many of our cities are in ruins. Our public transportation system is a shambles. Our educational system is in steep decline and being privatized. Opioid addiction, suicide, mass shootings, depression and morbid obesity plague a population that has fallen into profound despair. The deep disillusionment and anger that led to Donald Trump's election, a reaction to the corporate coup d'etat and the poverty afflicting at least half of the country, have destroyed the myth of a functioning democracy. Presidential tweets and rhetoric celebrate hate, racism and bigotry and taunt the weak and the vulnerable. The president in an address before the United Nations threatened to obliterate another nation in an act of genocide. We are worldwide objects of ridicule and hatred. The foreboding for the future is expressed in the rash of dystopian films, motion pictures that no longer perpetuate American virtue and exceptionalism or the myth of human progress. the demise of the United States as the preeminent global power could come far more quickly than anyone imagines, McCoy writes. Despite the aura of omnipotence empires often project, most are surprisingly fragile, lacking the inherent strength of even the modest nation-state. Indeed, a glance at their history should remind us that the greatest of them are susceptible to collapse from diverse causes, with fiscal pressures usually a prime factor. For the better part of 2 centuries, the security and prosperity of the homeland has been the main objective for most stable states, making foreign or imperial adventures an expendable option, usually allocated no more than 5% of the domestic budget. Without the financing that arises almost organically inside a sovereign nation, empires are famously predatory in their relentless hunt for plunder or profit. Witness the Atlantic slave trade, Belgium's rubber lusting the Congo, British India's opium commerce, the Third Reich's rape of Europe, or the Soviet exploitation of Eastern Europe. When revenues shrink or collapse, McCoy points out, the empires become brittle. So delicate is their ecology of power that, when things start to go truly wrong, the empires regularly unravel with unholy speed. Just a year for Portugal, 2 years for the Soviet Union, 8 years for France, 11 years for the Ottomans, 17 for Great Britain, and, in all likelihood, just 27 years for the United States, counting from the crucial year 2003 when the U.S. invaded Iraq, he writes. Many of the estimated 69 empires that have existed throughout history lacked competent leadership in their decline, having ceded power to monstrosities such as the Roman Emperor Caligula and Nero. In the United States, the reins of authority may be in the grasp of the first in a line of depraved demagogues. For the majority of Americans, the 2020s will likely be remembered as a demoralizing decade of rising prices, stagnant wages, and fading international competitiveness, McCoy writes. The loss of the dollar as the global reserve currency will see the U.S. unable to pay for its huge deficits by selling Treasury bonds, which will be drastically devalued at that point. There will be a massive rise in the cost of imports. Unemployment will explode. Domestic clashes over what McCoy calls insubstantial issues will fuel a dangerous hypernationalism that could morph into an American fascism. The discredited elite, suspicious and even paranoid in an age of decline, will see enemies everywhere. The array of instruments created for global dominance, wholesale surveillance, the evisceration of civil liberties, sophisticated torture techniques, militarized police, the massive prison system, the thousands of militarized drones and satellites will be employed in the homeland. The empire will collapse and the nation will consume itself within our lifetimes if we do not wrest power from those who rule the corporate state.
Says is the empire will limp along steadily, losing influence until the dollar is dropped as the world's reserve currency. Well, whether that's true or not doesn't matter, because the U.S. could go into a massive depression. The world could go into a massive depression. It doesn't matter. The rich are not, and their empire. See, he's mixing up the United States as a kind of, he's still seeing it as this country the world won World War II and we became this great superpower and all this stuff. Well, all that's just smoke and mirrors, man. I'm telling you. So, and depressions have come and gone. The Great Depression, you know, fucking after the Great Depression, the United States became this supposed great empire that he's talking about. So the you know, the Great Depression was right before World War II. And World War II did not make America, obviously the nuclear weapons, but then everybody got them. So none of that really matters. He's seeing the United States and its military as this great empire, like Rome, right? But in fact, the great empire wasn't Rome. Well, back then, empire meant a kind of different thing, right? I mean, your armies went around conquering everything in sight. We never did that. I mean, we haven't done, Russia kind of tried to do that after World War II to a certain extent. But Russia is part of the same empire that we are, even though we are taught not to think in those terms. Look, it's what I call I call their security apparatus the international security apparatus, and it's like an international CIA, and they do all of their picking on countries and putting them into debt and all that kind of stuff, which you can go read Confessions of an Economic Hitman if you don't understand how that works, and USAID and all that, and Guatemala and El Salvador and everything, they're constantly trying to stick their nose into everybody's business and make it their business, right? So if it's an international security apparatus, it's an international state of the rich, and it doesn't have any borders, and so he keeps thinking in terms of the United States as this great empire. Well, it's not. That's not the empire, and and it doesn't matter whether that goes up or down. Countries will go up and down and become more and less powerful, and there will be wars that are won or lost, race wars and religious wars and that are won or lost. But the rich have this all figured out. They've survived for thousands of years now, and they've done well out of it. Very rarely, sorry, but you know how these web pages are, they like to scream at you. They can get the chance. So, I mean, he's got that wrong. I mean, I love the guy for being so progressive, and I love that he's famous, and I love that people love him. I think it's very important that we get ahead every way, but you can't expect him to really know everything, and you can't expect him to be an expert in all this stuff. He's an expert in progressivism. He's an expert in how taking care of the poor is important and all that kind of stuff. Which reminds me, I need to do a segment on them pulling blankets off of people right when cold weather's coming about, and in Europe, in Brussels actually, and in LA I think it was, or San Diego, all these cops running around finding homeless people and stealing their blankets. So look forward to that. I'm going to do something on the homeless and not allowing people to feed them and all kinds of stuff. Really just makes me sick, because I could be homeless. I mean, I am kind of homeless. I don't really own a home. Don't really have a home to call my own. I live with other people all my life. So I do have a horse in the race, and I do find it very interesting and study it a lot, so I'll do something on that. And of course the empire is the cause of all of our suffering, right? I mean, from top to bottom. So, I don't think he got it right there, and I don't think all these people who we call brilliant, and they're doing the best they can. I would say guys like Assange are brilliant, and Greenwald, and I mean, it's not so much how brilliant you are anyway as how brave you are. I mean, these are brave people. Short of a sudden and widespread popular revolt, which does not seem likely, and he's got that right, the death spiral appears unstoppable. Well, the death spiral, first of all, it's not as bad as it sounds. If you look at history, we're actually killing each other at a far lower rate over the last 20 years, even including Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria. And we're actually we've slowed down a lot. But and that's not going to bring down any empires. And it says that the United States will cease to exist in a decade or at most two. Well, you know, we've got nuclear weapons. Who's gonna make us cease to exist? Because we're talking Armageddon if that were to happen. So he says it'd be China. China has no interest in trying to take over the world. They're not interested in empire. He says it's becoming a military juggernaut, but I mean, I think they're more interested in getting their own shit together at the moment. So he says the world will be carved up between Russia, China, India, Brazil, Turkey, South Africa. Nah. Where does he get this shit? Let me tell you something. In 20 years, in 50 years, China will be China, Russia will be Russia, India will be India, Brazil will be Brazil. This guy, I think he's just trying to sensationalize things. And we're not going to fight some massive war with China. There's no way. I mean, both of us would come out with nothing. Matter of fact, a war between China and the United States, or Russia and the United States, would end up with both countries being so weak, because we'd nuke each other practically out of existence, that all the other countries would take us over. And you'd have something like Blade Runner. I mean the book, not the movie. In the movie, I think they didn't have a nuclear war. So that's not going to happen. And, you know, no offense, Chris. Like I say, I love what you're all about. But what you're saying here is, to be quite honest, I hope that the poor people out there who read this stuff by these guys don't take it too seriously, because it's just their opinion. And you know, if you love, like I said, Blade Runner type, if you like the idea of this Blade Runner kind of post-apocalyptic and you think it's fun, well, first of all, you got your head up your ass, okay? If you think it's funny or cute or something, it's not. And it's not what we're looking to do. I mean, we're looking for more of a utopian kind of future. And I know that's hard for some people to see when they're reading this stuff constantly. You know, this is nice sci-fi, is what it is, Chris. And, you know, good luck with that. You can make some money, but please don't pass it off as economic predictions. I mean, it's just not. We're more likely to see a progressive and a utopian kind of future, an explosion of utopia, like in Star Trek, where everybody's like, oh, well, we got past that, we don't do that anymore, you know. Much more likely. He says that fading empires are more likely to incline to ill-considered displays of power, dreaming of bold military master strokes. Well, that's not how okay, we'll just call them what they are, right? The New World Order. That's not really how they work, and they're not on their way down. If anything, right now they're on their way up. But they are constantly worried about us, what we're going to do, and whether we're going to allow them, because we're millions and they're, very few. And even with nuclear weapons and all this armies, and it's, assuming they have control of armies, but they certainly have the money to very quickly, for instance, buy a Blackwater or put a Blackwater into operation against us, right? But the hope is that they're going to come to their senses, and they're going to say, well, look, the people who we don't hate, I mean, they're people too. Yeah, they're scared of us, and yeah, anytime you have groups facing off each other, you have the antagonism and the fight for control, the fight for dominance and all that kind of stuff. But we're offering to end all that. We're offering to, if we do it my way, and you better do it my way, because if you don't, you're going to find out that it's going to be more like what he's talking about right now. And I'm not the only person who wants to do it my way, okay? So we offer them this deal, right? And you've heard about the deal already. Okay, so say they take it, and everybody lives happily ever after. That sounds good to me, man. And I think it'll sound good to them too. I think it'll sound very good to them. I think they'll go for it in a heartbeat, because I think that's all that they want. I don't think they want to get rid of us. I don't think they want to cull the, they may feel like they have to cull the population because it becomes so dangerous, but we should do something about that. They shouldn't feel we're dangerous to them. They should feel like we, as a people, actually want anything but a violent confrontation with them, right? Anything but. Do anything to avoid that. Even promise them the world. And I don't mean the world because they have the world now. Promise them the world in terms of their lifestyle. So we promise them that they will forever be able to go to Harvard, and I've already explained all that. That's the way out of this. Because this is a worldwide, like I say, the rich are not, in borders. The rich are the Rothschilds, and whoever in China is like vastly wealthy, and in Indonesia is Suharto and his little thugs who are vastly wealthy. They control with the United States. You know what I mean. That's the New World Order. And we have to make a deal with the New World Order that makes them feel comfortable and safe, right? And secure. And the product of that deal has to be that we begin the work of making the lower classes feel comfortable and secure, giving them a right to basic essential essential goods and services, right? So they get, and that's just the beginning. First we'll give everybody their essential goods and services. So you need food, you need water, you need electricity, you probably need the internet and a computer, all that kind of crap that people consider make life worth living. Just and not beyond that, So if they're a musician, maybe they'll get a guitar and an amplifier and some recording software and all that. We'll get into all that, so everybody can have what they want. I'm sure that everybody feels like if that's how it works, that they'll be more than happy to do their part. So they'll, work at McDonald's for 10 years, work as middle management at McDonald's for 10 years, and work as CEO for 10 years, maybe take out, pick up the trash for 10 years, so that everybody feels like they're treated equally within the system and that they're paid their part. And hopefully we can get that rolling so well that, especially with automation, so that everybody can have everything they want. And maybe that will help knock down the drive to have babies so much, because people have babies kind of out of a fear that things aren't going well and they need to have kids, so that, or whatever. I don't know. There's lots of reasons why people have kids, but I'm not going to get into all that. Let the scientists hash it out. Let the people get on the internet and hash that out together, and take the arguments and process them and crunch down the numbers and get everything perfect and do it. Okay? And so that's how I see things progressing. And that doesn't fit in anywhere with this and that Chris Hedges says in this article. So I can't agree with this article and most of it. I mean, I agree with parts of it and disagree completely with kind of the low expectations of humanity. I mean, God, I don't believe in that. I mean, I know how bad people can be, but it's usually because they've been treated badly and it leaves them with a bad attitude. Well, we can get rid of all that, you know? So, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and tear this article to shreds, which I could very easily do. Okay, so his final paragraph says, a discredited elite, suspicious and even paranoid in an age of decline. We'll see enemies everywhere. And, you know, right now I don't see that happening because they feel pretty safe in their capitalist cocoon. I mean, they've created a world where, you know, Atlas doesn't shrug. They've got it all figured out. And so I don't see that happening either. And I don't see, I mean, we either make a deal and everybody's happy, or it just goes along the way it is and we will never beat them, which means everything will just stay exactly the way it is. Might get a little bit worse, a little bit better, depending on how we handle overpopulation, but it won't really change. You know, nobody's gonna overthrow the rich. They can't even understand what it is. I mean, it's a worldwide network of wealth, and how are they going to beat it? I mean, the worst they could do is maybe knock off the rich in one country, and if that worked, well, the rich would just kick back and wait for everything to die down, and then they'd just fuck everybody and twist it all around and come back out. They will stay on top because you guys do not have the intelligence or the resources to knock them off. They're like a octopus with 1,000 arms, and if you cut even one off, any one of them off, it'll just grow back like overnight. So you and your groups of people who think you're so smart that you could beat the rich, you don't even know what you're trying to beat. So he says, the array of instruments created for global dominance, wholesale surveillance, the evisceration of civil liberties, sophisticated torture techniques. He's leaving something out. How about pretending like none of that exists? I mean, the wealthy can very easily just draw back into their shells and let all the world pretend like it has democracy and all freedom and everything, and just operate in I mean, they're very good at operating in the background, and they're very good at parting with bits of themselves in order to become invisible again to the people. So, you know, all this other stuff, this hardcore stuff that they may or may not do to one extent or another, they usually have their underlings do those things so that they can't be blamed for them. You know, we can't blame the rich and their fancy palaces all around the world for wholesale surveillance. We blame that on the U.S. government. And the U.S. government isn't the one who really does it. They do it on behalf of the rich, and the rich, you're not going to do anything to the rich because of wholesale surveillance, because of evisceration of civil liberties. You're going to go after the government, and then the government's just, I mean, it's like a revolving door anyway. They're going to just change so that you're not going to have, you know, you'll have somebody to scapegoat for a little while, but that's about it. Militarized police, well, police, they're militarized, they're not militarized. The massive prison system, well, that's mainly in the United States. The thousands of militarized drones and satellites will be employed in the homeland. The empire will collapse in the well, Chris, make up your mind. I mean, if they're going to have all this stuff to throw at us, then why will the empire collapse? If anything, I mean, it would have collapsed before they had all this. I mean, people have been angry all along. So, you know, what you're saying doesn't really make sense. We'll collapse and the nation will consume itself within our lifetimes if we do not wrest power from those who rule the corporate state. Well, like I say, we don't have to wrest power from them. They will cut a deal, and they'll cut my deal. That's what we'll end up doing. They will take my deal. So, you know, I mean, maybe you wrote this a long time ago. What was the date on it again? I know I saw it up here somewhere. October 1st, 2017. No, it was not that long ago. You know, Chris, don't be such a gloomy Gus, alright? I mean, you got a homeless Uncle Sam with a raggedy tag. What's he got, a hoodie on? We'll destroy the world for money. It's funny. But, you know, I've been listening to this doom and gloom, end of the world prophecy since I was probably that high. And believing it sometimes. Or not so much believing it as saying to myself, could it be true? And, you know what? 50 years later, the world's still here. Life is good for a lot of us, and we want to give back. We want to make it better. And I'm not saying I'm rich, but I'm not poor. I'm not suffering. I get to do whatever I want just about. I mean, maybe I'd like to travel more and stuff like that, but maybe not. I certainly enjoy my life as it is. We just want to make sure everybody gets a life like ours, right? The good people like me who aren't doing like bad, you know, aren't suffering, aren't having to argue with people, fight with people, be dragged off to jail because, you know, they criminalize poverty and then they make you poor. I mean, that's wild, right? So, you know, don't be such a gloomy Gus. I think we're going to do it. I think we're going to pull it off. You know, everybody's kind of tired of letting the same old people run the world. And they're looking to people like me and Bernie and to, you know, like give us a shot. Well, I give the world my ideas. Take my ideas, put them to work, and if in 50 years I'm wrong, well, you can kill me. Because I'm 55 now, so 56, I'll be dead by then. I'm joking. But seriously, I mean, I have total faith in, I mean, I don't like dictators, and I don't like, but if you were to make me king of the world, I would straighten the place out. People would listen to me, and they would understand what I'm trying to say, and they'd go along with it. I mean, I'm not hard to figure out. The stuff that I'm saying to you is not hard to figure out, and we'll do it. And definitely need a positive attitude. I mean, that's for sure. I understand it's hard to have a positive attitude when you're suffering, when you're in pain, physical, mental, anguish and all these things. But we'll get through this, and we'll straighten it. Really, we'll be okay, Chris.
Interest in Libya in 2012.
The server contains personal communications from my husband and me.
Only time I got on the internet, I did 2 emails, and I ordered Christmas presents from a reservation. Otherwise, I found people said embarrassing things on emails. I didn't want to be one of them.
I mean, and how many angels dance on the head of a pin? I have really nothing to.
represented Wall Street as a senator from New York, and I went to Wall Street in December of 2007, before the big crash that we had, and I basically said, cut it out. Quit foreclosing on homes. Quit engaging in these kinds of speculative behaviors.
Now, who's exactly to blame for the housing crisis? And I think there's plenty of blame to go around. Home buyers who paid extra fees to avoid documenting their income should have known they were getting in over their heads.
Of course we have to deal with the problem that the banks are still too big to fail. We can never let the American taxpayer and middle-class families ever have to bail out the kind of speculative behavior that we saw. But we also have to worry about some of the other players. AIG, a big insurance company, Lehman Brothers, an investment bank. There's this whole area called shadow banking. That's where the experts tell me the next potential problem could come from. So I'm with both Senator Sanders and Governor O'Malley in putting a lot of... represented New York, and I represented New York on 9/11. When we were attacked, where were we attacked? We were attacked in downtown Manhattan, where Wall Street is. I did spend a whole lot of time and effort helping them rebuild. That was good for New York, it was good for the economy, and it was a way to rebuke the terrorists who had attacked our country.
9/11 was bad.
I agree with you.
As Senator Clinton, the pressures are very different. It's a well-financed industry. A lot of people don't realize that the industry that gave the most money to Washington over the past few years was not the oil industry, was not pharmaceuticals. It was consumer credit products. Those are the people, the credit card companies have been giving money, and they have influence.
And Mrs. Clinton was one of them, a senator.
She has taken money from the groups, and more to the point, she worries about them as a constituency.
So what does this mean, though, to these people, these millions of people out there whom the politicians cavort in front of as favoring the middle class and then are beholden to the powerful interests that undermine the middle class? What does it say about politics today?
You know, this is the scary part about democracy today. We're talking again about the impact of money. The credit industry on this bankruptcy bill has spent tens of millions of dollars lobbying, and as their profits grow, they just throw more into lobbying for how they can get laws that will make it easier and easier and easier to drain money out of the pockets of middle-class families.